remarks, if I may. As Eve said, I'm David Hope-Jones. For those of you I don't know, I'm Chief Executive of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, and really thrilled to see today's meeting and to be a part of the discussion. We've got a good number who have booked in. I think I just checked, and there's 47 that have booked in total. So fully expect the number to continue to grow in the coming minutes. There's many of our most active members represented in this call, but also excitingly, a number of names and faces that are new to me, and also really thrilled that we have a number of Malawian participants as well, which is, for all the challenges that COVID has thrown all of our ways, I think is a great bonus. Is this technology makes it much easier for us to be able to listen to a range of voices in Malawi. So really hope that there's that strong Malawian input. In a moment, I'll hand over to Eve Hartswood, who will very kindly chair our discussions today. Before I do, I suppose the main thing I want to do is thank everyone for joining, but particularly to thank Eve for her sort of drive and leadership in this space. Since probably back to March and April time, Eve was contacting us and saying, you know, as we're doing our COVID-19 coordination work, can we make sure there are specific channels to represent those faith-based organizations working in this space? And our thanks to Eve for making sure that happened, but also helping drive and coordinate that activity. And our sense was that there was real value in having an informal conversation with our faith-based members and their partners in Malawi that I'm sure will touch on COVID-19, but will also extend beyond it. It's very common for the Scotland-Malawi Partnership to have a forum that's chaired by one of our members. So I don't think any great change in process there. But I am keen to note that we really appreciate Eve's sort of drive and leadership in this space. So with those opening remarks, and I might, if I may, come back at the very end of the meeting, in case it's useful for the SNP Secretariat itself to say a few words on what we're going to do with this taking forwards. But Eve, with those opening remarks, all protocols observed, and over to you, Eve.
Thank you very much, David, and would very much like to welcome everyone to this Faith Forum and discussion being hosted by the Scotland-Malawi Partnership. I wonder, yes, Craig has just put up a list of participants, and it's been really nice to be communicating with you all throughout this time as we've built this discussion together. I am a member of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership through one of the many church-to-church partnerships that exist between the Church of Scotland and the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian in Malawi. I'm a visiting researcher at Edinburgh University and involved in one of the research projects that links academics and churches in Scotland and Malawi. But there are hundreds of partnership links that support one another. This meeting is supportive of all the links and partnerships that work together in both countries. Many of our speakers and participants today from Malawi are part of the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, known as CCAP or CCAP. And CCAP is the largest Protestant denomination in Malawi. But this meeting is open to all faith groups in Malawi and Scotland, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the call. And as you can see on the slide, there's a very broad range of groups being represented. As David touched on, the SNP have hosted 7 Zoom meetings around COVID-19 and how the partnerships are working together to meet the challenges that the pandemic represents. And it's really nice to be part of this first meeting that focuses on the faith groups. And the main aim is to build discussion around the opportunities and the challenges that faith groups are facing at the moment. Before we turn to the speakers for today's meeting, I'd like to turn to Mike Beresford, who is Director for Zambesi Mission, to bring us before God in a few words of prayer. Mike, can I hand over to you, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Eve. I'll just read a few verses from Psalm 8 as we pray. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. We praise you, Lord, and thank you that you are a majestic God. We thank you, Lord, that you are mindful of us, whether we're here in the UK or in Malawi. We thank you, Lord, that you are a God who is mindful of us. We thank you also that you're a majestic God. And we come to you this afternoon from different backgrounds in different places, looking to partner more closely with one another, particularly thinking about the needs, both physical and spiritual, in Malawi. Lord, guide us this afternoon, we pray. May you speak through us, speak to us this afternoon. And we thank you for the privilege that we have of coming together. We praise your name. Guide us this afternoon, we pray. Amen.
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 Amen. Thank you very much, Mike, for setting us before God as we begin our meeting. We have 7 speakers today offering perspectives on worship, faith, protective action, the medical side of mission and care. And all participation is greatly valued, and we hope that the discussion will connect us in mutual support of all faith activities. You can make comments and raise questions by typing them into the chat function, which is found at the bottom of the screen. And we hope our speakers will be able to have time to respond to a few questions at the end of their talks, and also hope that this will be fairly informal. But in order to give our speakers time to present, I'm going to try and move through the talks as promptly as I can, and then allow time for further discussion at the end of the meeting. So please do use that chat function to add your comments and suggestions as we go along. And I'd like to move now to our first speaker, who's really one of the architects of the Scotland-Malawi partnership, Reverend Professor Kenneth Ross, who's been chair of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership for 11 successful years, an author of many books and research articles on Malawi. He's now based in Zomba, working with the 3 CCAP theological colleges. And I'd like to invite Ken to introduce some of the historical background on faith and the links between Malawi, Scotland, and the SNP. Over to you, Ken.
Well, thank you very much, Eve, and thank you so much for getting us all organized. Greetings, everyone, from Zomba. When Eve put this challenge to me of trying to sketch some of the history that lies behind our meeting today, it reminded me of the time that I was working on writing this book, Malawi and Scotland, together in the talking place since 1859. Nothing like giving a plug for your own book when you get the chance. But I remember when I was coming towards the end of writing this history, I thought, well, I've got to try and summarize what the whole history has been all about. And I proposed 3 features that have defined this interaction over all the years between Malawi and Scotland. One, the struggle for justice. Two, the sharing of faith. And three, the experience of friendship. And I guess today our meeting is primarily focused around the second one, sharing at the level of faith. But the three are so intertwined that it's difficult to consider one without taking account of the other two. And indeed, all of this was wrapped up from the word go in the person of David Livingstone. When he arrived in Malawi, he was inspired by a vision of social justice, particularly the need to eliminate the slave trade. He came as a person of faith, personally devout, and always ready to speak of his faith. And he had a genius for friendship, making lasting friendships wherever he went in Africa. Mind you, none of these three would have meant anything if they had not evoked a response in the Malawian communities, which welcomed their visitor in 1859. But in fact, Livingstone's faith and values resonated in those communities. So they came to the conclusion that there was a mission on which they could work together. One important thing about Livingstone and the generation of missionaries that came after him was that their faith had a broad application that included commitment to social justice and plans for economic development. This resonated with Malawian communities where faith was not regarded as just one small department of life, but where the whole of life was understood in terms of a vision of faith. So the sharing of faith through the generations has not been like a sub-theme in the relationship, but more like the inner meaning that makes sense of the whole. The faith dimension has ensured that the partnership is about sharing at the level of what matters most, rather than just cooperating on a time-limited project for a little while. One question I asked myself coming into this meeting is whether across all the years of sharing our life and faith with one another, did we ever have to deal with anything before, like COVID-19? We did have, of course, the HIV and AIDS pandemic that was devastating for Malawi during the 1990s and is still with us, even if the advent of antiretroviral drugs have mitigated its impact. It was much more deadly, in fact, in Malawi than COVID-19 has been so far. But normal life went on, only with the great sorrow of many young lives ending prematurely. But I wonder if a closer parallel to our current situation is the time of the First World War. Now, I know that a pandemic is not a war, and you have to be careful about pushing the comparison too far. But in terms of all of a sudden having to meet an adverse situation that calls for everyone's life to be rearranged, maybe the First World War gives us some precedent. It was a huge shock to the people of Malawi. Being under British colonial rule had its downsides, like the loss of land and the imposition of taxes. But it also had an upside. At the beginning, it seemed like it had brought peace to the country after a very disturbed period of intertribal warfare. But now, however, in 1914, the British brought to Malawi a war that was even more terrible and destructive than those that had gone before. thousands and thousands of Malawians suffered terribly. Not only the troops who were required to fight in the war, but the thousands of porters, the tenga, who were pressed into service. This was before mechanized transport had been introduced. So all the military equipment and supplies had to be physically carried by porters. They carried their loads for thousands of miles in appalling conditions and with minimal rations. Many did not survive. And even those who did were often broken men. Alexander Heatherwick wrote movingly of seeing the tenga limping back to their villages, physically and mentally broken by what they had gone through. In Scotland too, the suffering was immense. You can find villages in Scotland where almost an entire generation of young men were wiped out. And even those who survived were often traumatized. So both of our nations suffered greatly. And also the partnership between the two suffered, as travel and communication were very restricted. And I would say, and this is my own historical judgment, that it took a very long time to recover. All through the 1920s and 1930s, things were quite flat compared to the earlier period. And it was perhaps only with the struggle against the Federation in the 1950s that the partnership regained its elan and dynamism. But perhaps the point for us today, as we grapple with the effects of COVID-19, is that we have been through difficult and traumatic experiences before. Having a faith perspective does not make anyone immune to difficult times or to times of trial, but it can help to make sense of them. Meeting the adversities together and finding a way through where we support one another can make us stronger in the end. So we don't give up when we have to deal with a situation like the one brought about by COVID-19. This too can be part of God's good purposes for us as we work together as two nations with a particular historical bond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken, for going through that historical perspective and the way that faith has really guided people and partnerships through many difficulties. I wonder if I might invite anybody to ask a question or to ask Ken a perspective on this. Just unmute your microphone if you would like to. Maybe not at this moment, but I'm sure those questions are going to build, and certainly from my brief visit to Malawi last year, sort of getting a sense of that historical perspective and the way that we interact so closely between two nations, and it's been very interesting to follow how things have been developing in Malawi with the recent political changes. And this has, of course, impacted some of how people have been responding to COVID-19 at this point. And I wonder if Ken would be willing to comment on that.
Yes, it's been an amazing time in Malawi, because obviously having to meet the challenge of COVID is like something we've never seen before. but it's been almost simultaneous with this major political change. And I think for many of us living here, it's almost been like we can't keep it all in our head at the same time. That kind of a lot of things that are troubling and that might make us despair, but at the same time, very hopeful notes as well. I don't want to be too political, but I think it might be fair to say that Malawi's been a bit in the doldrums politically, and you probably would have noticed, many people taking to the streets after last year's elections, dissatisfied with the way the political process was unfolding, and these kind of protests and hopes, they can often end up being disappointed. But in fact, it's been a very, very positive story for Malawi this year, as once again it's been able to meet a major political challenge and deal with it in peaceful and constitutional ways. There have been occasional exceptions to that, times when things have been tense, some incidents of violence, but overall, the trend has been people working patiently, determinedly, peacefully, constitutionally, and it's brought a new government into office with a lot of positive message and positive energy. And I think it's also put Malawi in a better position to meet the COVID challenge than would have been the case before the election. So it's been a roller coaster, but in the midst of it, there's definitely signs of hope.
Yes, and interesting to see a pastor taking on the role and being elected as president. We have a question from David Hope Jens. David, would you like to voice your question?
Yeah, it's just maybe a question while other people sort of warming up to think of their own questions. Ken, always really useful to have that historical perspective, and wonderful that it's coming all the way from Zomba. I suppose I could keen to ask the sort of obvious but difficult question, looking forwards. I mean, where do you see the faith component in the bilateral relationship in, say, 30 years or so, as has been said? Malawi now has a president that is of the church. Where do you see it in 30 years?
Well, I'll need to search for my crystal ball with this one. Being a bit of a historian, we don't usually have to wind forward into the future. But I think the truth is that both countries are on a journey at the level of faith. And perhaps very different from each other, very different trajectories. I think it is quite telling in the Malawi case that when it was looking for new leadership, it ended up turning to a pastor. Obviously, politicians come from different walks of life, and you might think, oh, it's just a coincidence. But another way of looking at it is that there's more to it, and that there is a real premium being set on the faith dimension, not only as something for going to church on Sundays, but something that needs to inform the whole of life and guide the whole life of the nation. Scotland is, I guess, a very different story, very strong secularizing trend. If you look at things like church membership statistics, you can think, well, that looks at first sight as if faith is falling away and becoming less and less part of things. But again, another way around of looking at it is that it may be a pathway to a new discovery of faith that you know, in this secular environment, coming through a situation like COVID, I guess a lot of people have asked questions about themselves, about their lives, about society, about the world, all the kind of terrain into which faith speaks. So I think it is a challenging time for people of faith in the Scottish context, but people of faith are people of hope. So I think in 30 years' time, it'll still be part of this story.
Well, thank you for that message of hope and perspective and of encouragement. And I noticed that there's been a couple of mentions on the chat from Mike and some of the history that we're reminded of. So I would encourage everyone to look at that chat box and take some of those suggestions forward. And I think it's now a good time to introduce our next speaker, if I may. We had hoped that Dr. Nyasulu, moderator of the General Assembly of CCAP, could be able to join us today. Because there's interest in the position that the General Assembly has taken in discussion with the Malawian government to continue worship during the pandemic, retaining congregations, although limited to 100. Unfortunately, he's had other commitments, but he's asked for 3 very able speakers to offer their views and perspectives from CCAP from different parts of Malawi, and we're very grateful to them for stepping forward at relatively short notice to participate. And I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Colby Kumwenda, who's Deputy Principal at the University of Livingstonia in Mzuzu, to give his talk looking at COVID-19 and the changing face of spiritual trajectory in Malawi, if you may. Thank you. If you're able to go ahead, Dr. Colby.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you very quietly. If you can move the microphone closer to you, that would be great.
Hello. Hello.
That's good, thank you.
Is it clear?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this platform. Coming from CCAP, Synod of Livingstonia, here in Mzuzu. My presentation this afternoon is on COVID-19 and the changing face of spiritual trajectory in Malawi, but more especially focusing on the CCAP Synod of Livingstonia. I begin my discussion where others, I suppose, have already tackled the issue of the pandemic we are facing in. It is becoming a national but also a global concern because the coronavirus, which started in Wuhan as per history, is no longer a Wuhan issue. We are still battling with ancient questions. Where is God when it hurts? And we can also make another question out of it. Where is God in the COVID-19 pandemic? This is a question that the CCAP Synod of Livingstonia is battling with. And I hope it's not only the CCAP Synod of Livingstonia, it's a global question that needs creative attention. The pandemic at its core is attacking social fabrics. I do concur with the World Health Organization declaration in March 2020 that the outbreak is a global pandemic. As I earlier on indicated, this pandemic is no longer a Wuhan issue, but it is our issue here in Malawi and the CCAP Synod of Livingstonia. You agree with me that according to the demographic survey, the infection rate in Malawi has tremendously escalated in almost all the corners of the national divide. Furthermore, a number of people, on a sad note, have lost their lives, or they have lost their beloved ones. And this has prompted the government to engage in a crucial intervention of social distance, reduction in number of gatherings, and to a greater extent, lockdown. In this case, a partial lockdown. And you also agree with me that even though we have this partial lockdown, but we have faced with a number of issues within the restriction regarding where to get the basic amenities for a day. And also with the presence of the COVID-19, you will see that all over the world, Malawi inclusive, schools have closed. A lot of people have found themselves in a jobless situation. Churches with the restrictions of 100 people per gathering has also been affected spiritually. And the issue at hand is, what are the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the church in Malawi, and in particular, CCAP Synod of Livingstonia? The economy of the church has been affected because people that were working and thereafter they were to give are the ones that are now jobless. And at the same time, social distance. In the history of the church in Malawi, we believe in meeting together, regardless of distance. And with this issue of 1 meter, 1.5 meters apart, it has shaken the core of socialization. At the same time, the core of evangelization. Because within the social fabrics, we believe that we need to sit close to each other. And by so doing, we are defining aspect of neighborhood. Even though we are facing with these challenges, but to some extent, we have seen that the COVID-19 has brought some opportunities. The unity of the church has seen itself to a greater extent that people continue assembling together and pray for the passing away or eradication or extinction of COVID-19. You agree with me? Last night or last day, the General Assembly was meeting in Mulanje, and they're still meeting today. One of the issues on the agenda is the issue of COVID-19. So, to some extent, we can say COVID-19 has cemented churches together to discuss an issue of national and societal interest. Even theologically, you will see that people have now developed a certain theological framework and mindset towards the pandemic. And I hope theological institutions will put the COVID-19 on their agenda and discuss as part and parcel of the theological destiny. To sum up, the church should see the challenges of COVID-19 not in a negative sense, but should see these as stepping stones to realize the opportunities, so that one day we'll come together and say, in COVID-19, we built fellowship. In COVID-19, we were together. In COVID-19, we understand the presence of God in his absence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Colby, and lots of interesting points coming through, with the church still meeting together amongst the shifting social fabric at the moment in the face of COVID-19, but yet showing great unity in prayer and encouraging the opportunities for fellowship there. I wonder if anyone at this point has a question that they would like to raise or a comment. If so, do unmute your mic and go ahead and put it forward.
I have a question myself. I have a question from Malawi.
Go ahead.
Especially I have a comment about COVID-19 in Malawi. We see God in Malawi as being so silent in this pandemic. But the idea is we should not condemn God. We feel we should not condemn God for being silent. Maybe he is about advising us about something that we must correct in our lives. For example, in Malawi, we are so much communal in our setup as a community. Maybe we are not doing enough in caring for one another. When one is hungry, one must help. Again, on Scotland and Malawi partnership, maybe God is telling us we are not doing something enough. And I can give an example of such an idea of God being silent. Job chapter 10, 13 and 14, where Job is trying to condemn God that he is silent, and he should have told him about his sin before punishing him. But God was not punishing him actually. God was kind of overriding over Satan, that he is having Job as somebody who is good. And in Malawi, that's what many of us are thinking. And maybe we should find ways how we can care for one another what they
I
did
wonder, Joseph,
after World
sorry
War
to
II.
interrupt your flow, but we're having some trouble making out your words very clearly, and we'd love to be able to hear what you're saying. Either could you adjust your mic, or could you type your question into the chat, and then we will be able to understand you more clearly. Is that okay? Yes, there's a few people who've not been able to hear that clearly. I don't know if Reverend Colby was able to respond at this point, or whether he would like that question in the chat box to come to later. One of the things that I thought I heard Reverend Joseph Tipper trying to come to as part of his question and his comment was, is God judging us just now? Is that something that Reverend Colby or anyone else would like to offer a perspective on?
Yes, Eve.
Hello.
So my name is Rayana Chunga from Blantyre Synod. I have a comment, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I'm excited to see, for once in a very long time, the synods in Malawi, Blantyre, Nkoma, and Livingstonia, getting united to respond to the Malawi government. For quite some years, these synods have been divided, by politics and sometimes even regionalism. But in as much as we're celebrating the unity of these synods at a national level, there's been a very disjointed response on the theology of the COVID-19 on the ground. What I find Christians struggling with right now is the very question that Dr. Colby Kumwenda was referring to. Others have struggled with the fact that, do we now stay at home and wait until this pandemic is over or is drastically reduced before we go back to church? Others have said, no, this is the work of the enemy, it's the work of the devil. You've got to go to church. And if you don't go to church, then it signifies your lack of spiritual maturity and weak theology that you have towards God and his protection towards his people. I've gone to churches where literally the pastors have preached against those people that have not come to church. And at the end of the day, on the ground, you have Christians who are divided because what theology is the Presbyterian Church or our theologians and leaders in the church preaching? Are we saying that as a response to this COVID, that if you take these preventive measures, especially if you decide not to go to church, I'll give you a scenario like I'm a member of St. Columba, 5,000 members. If you're going to say 100 members can attend the church service, you can only imagine how many people don't attend church, not voluntarily, but because the numbers don't allow us to go to church in the first place. So there's a whole rotation basis that's going on and an increment in church services. So I think I wanted to raise that concern that there hasn't been much unison in terms of the theology responding to this crisis. In fact, if anything, there's been a lot of stigma, others judging others because of how they've responded to the pandemic.
Yes, it definitely seeing the challenges coming forward across the different churches and places of worship, where people want to worship and they also wish to be safe, and these are two things that need to work in combination for people's safety. I know some of the churches have been doing more services in order to allow people to continue in worship, and also spreading very important messages of support and safety amongst the congregation. I wonder if anyone else would like to come in at this point and comment.
Yes, because there are some who are denying safety means of fighting against the COVID. They say we should not have safety measures. Rather, we should all only pray. But we as church leaders, we are saying
we are still struggling to hear you. Sorry, Dr. Tipper. Can you type some of these points into the chat, and what we'll try and do is sort out those audio issues and come back to
okay, thank you.
We will come back to this discussion, I think, at the end.
Okay.
We can then perhaps address this more broadly. And I'd like, I think, to move on now to our next speaker, who is Rev Dr Gertrude Kapuma. I just want to check to see if you're on the call, Rev Gertrude. I don't see your name there at the moment. If you are there, please, could you let us know just now, switch on your mic? Okay, we'll try and get to Reverend Gertrude's talk shortly, but maybe Brian, if you are ready, I can just give a few words of introduction to your talk if you are available to speak next. So Reverend Brian Theu is the Dean of Studies at Zomba Theological College. He's also studying for his PhD at Aberdeen University. And he's going to give a talk today about COVID-19 situation in the context of Zomba Theological College. Brian, can I hand over to you, please?
Mute. Hello. Yeah,
Hi, Brian.
we are using the same laptop. So get Dr. Kapuma is ready. I'm here.
Are you able to move in front of the camera, Brian, so that we can see you?
Same laptop.
Oh, I see. So Gertrude, this is you. My apologies. Please go ahead. But before you start, I would like to give you a proper introduction, if I may. Okay. So we're joined by Rev Dr Gertrude Kapuma, who is the first female minister in Blantyre Synod to hold a PhD. And we're thrilled to have you with us today and to talk about the challenges faced by CCAP in Malawi during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Please, Gertrude.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I would like to bring you warm greetings from the CCAP General Assembly that has been meeting today. As an assembly, we want to send our Christian love to you, our brothers and sisters in Scotland. And for your information, the CCAP Assembly has just elected new office bearers. The moderator now is the Reverend Biswick Nkoma. of Nkoma Synod. And the Secretary General, for the first time in the history of the CCAP, is Reverend Mwawi Nyerenda, a female minister of Livingstonia Synod. And the first Deputy Secretary General is also a female minister, and that is Rev Dr Gertrude Kapuma. The CCAP, like any other church in the world, has been challenged during this period of COVID-19. The impact of coronavirus was not expected to be that much. We thought it will come and then it will pass quickly. When it was first announced in Malawi that we were going to have a lockdown, we had not yet registered cases of COVID-19 up until in April. The CCAP church did not close its churches. What we did was to allow people to come to church only to a number of 100. More services were introduced in order to make sure that the churches were not full and that people were able to maintain social distance, that of 1 meter apart. Churches all over, even in the villages, provided its members with water and soap to wash hands with before they entered the church. And I'm glad to say that organizations came in to assist local churches in giving them buckets, basins, and soap, so that members going to church would use this and to keep the safety of COVID-19. It was a place of safety in the church because all the restrictions that were put in place, the church was able to adhere to. It is encouraging to note that members washed hands. Members today are able to wear their masks when coming to church. In some of the areas where members cannot afford to buy their own masks, the church has gone ahead to provide them, to buy for them, so that people can come to church wearing the masks. In the urban areas, we've seen some churches even buying the temperature guns so that they can monitor the temperature of people coming to church. All these things have been done to make sure that the churches are able to adhere to COVID-19 measures of safety. The unfortunate thing is that in Malawi, the COVID-19 pandemic came at a time when the country was also having a presidential campaign. And people went to rallies in their numbers. This became a threat to the country. I'm saying it is unfortunate because Malawi had two critical issues. That one of COVID-19, and then that one of presidential election. It was like, yes, we know we have COVID-19, but at the same time, we want a change of government. So these things worked parallel. But out of this, there has been an impact in the church. Number one, because of COVID-19, the income of both people in the community and in the church has gone down due to the fact that many companies have closed down, people have been made redundant, and those with small-scale businesses are not able to make profits because of the cash flow. This has affected many households and even affecting family relationships. Looking at these problems, we'll see that it has also affected the church's income, that the church is not able to get the amount of money it gets all the time. And that has made the church to fail to address some of the issues, the social issues that it is supposed to be doing in order to help its members. Social issues like health programs, education programs, social support, and even developmental programs. The church at this point in time is even failing to visit its members so that at a critical time like this, they can support them and also they can be with them. The closure of schools for a long period has also affected the youth in Malawi because of having nothing to do, the church not being in a position to offer something for our young people to be doing. Some boys have engaged themselves in drugs, in alcohol abuse, and even being responsible for teenage pregnancies. Whilst on the other hand, girls have become pregnant, some have gone into early marriages. If schools were to reopen, some of these girls will not be able to go back to school. These are problems, and they are long-term problems for the church. And the church will need to put down mechanisms that will help these young people to address their problems and even to journey with them. Has there been an opportunity during this period of COVID-19? I see one opportunity that we can talk about. I call this an opportunity because we have seen the unity of the CCAP out of this situation. From the previous government, synods worked on their own because of their political differences. This attitude seems to change, I'm not sure, with the coming of the new government. This time around, when the government declared new steps to be followed in order to prevent the widespread of COVID-19, the church was only allowed to have 10 people to gather for church services. The leadership of the synods and that of the General Assembly did not agree to these proposed precautionary measures of COVID-19, when on the other hand, the government said that Parliament would be allowed to meet, and Parliament has many people than 100. The CCAP met with one voice and came up with a statement which faulted the government that they did not do any consultation when they had this law to be followed by the people of Malawi. The CCAP also proposed that as a church, they would continue to meet and that the gathering would be 100 per service and observing all the required precautions so that people could continue to worship. With the support of other churches and religious bodies, the government was able to rescind their decisions, and we have seen the churches going back and having their services with 100 persons per service and continuing to observe the necessary precautions that have been put in place. I would see that this unity of the CCAP is remarkable, and we want to pray that the CCAP would continue to take its role to be a prophetic church, to speak on behalf of the voiceless, to speak against injustice affecting its people, because we know that the people respect the church and the people have not stopped listening to the voice of the church. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's been interesting to hear about the unity of CCAP and joining with other partners and organisations to see that the church is adhering to the government guidelines, but also the problems that are being faced to continue the social support and care. I thank you very much for your contribution. And I'm very mindful that we are getting very short on time, and I would very much like to be able to allow all the presenters to be able to present. So if I may, can we delay any further questions until all our presenters have an opportunity to talk? We still have 4 presenters to present. Is there anybody amongst those, Brian, Jonathan, Arie and Cathy, who are short of time at the moment? In that case, we will move to Reverend Brian Theu as Dean of Studies at Zomba Theological College, and invite him to talk about COVID-19 and the situation in the context of Zomba Theological College. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much. Receive greetings from Zomba Theological College in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ in this time of COVID-19 uncertainty. Let me start with a historical background of Zomba Theological College. Zomba Theological College is a Christian institution which was opened in 1979 with an aim of training Presbyterian pastors who, at the end of their studies, are directly sent to serve in different congregations within Malawi and the Sister Synod of Harare and Zambia. The college belongs to the General Assembly of the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian CCAP, which comprises of the following synods: Blantyre, Nkoma, Livingstonia, Harare, and Zambia. The 3 synods of Blantyre, Nkoma, and Livingstonia are all in Malawi, whereas Harare is in Zimbabwe and Zambia in Zambia. Zomba Theological College is situated in the eastern region of Malawi. Currently, the college has a total of 170 students. 73 of these are full-time students, whereas 87 are distant learning students. Among the full-time students, 30 are ministerial students who are being trained to become church ministers. The remaining 53 are private students. All those in the distance learning program are private students. Currently, the ministerial students are from Blantyre, Nkoma, Livingstonia Synod, some from a church in Mozambique under Blantyre Synod, churches of class in Malawi, and the Methodist Church in Malawi. A short description of COVID situation in our context. Malawi registered the first case of COVID-19 on 3rd April 2020 in Blantyre, which is in the southern region. Currently, the country has registered about 4,919 COVID-19 cases, of which 169 have passed away, and 3,059 have recovered. The number of new cases increased during the month of July and into early August, but now the number of cases is decreasing in the past 2 weeks. The President of the Republic of Malawi declared Malawi as a disaster area on Friday, 20th March 2020, and ordered the closure of schools from 23rd March 2020 as part of precautionary measures to guard against COVID-19. Zomba Theological College was closed on 23rd March 2020. The COVID-19 situation has worsened and affected the already struggling financial position of the college. The uncertainty and abrupt closure of the college created the financial insolvent, as 75% of the income is generated from tuition fees. The situation has gravely affected Zomba Theological College in the following ways. Number one, the cash flow. The college generates its income from students' fees, property rentals, support from synods, and international partners. The pandemic, the closure of school, and the banning of large church gatherings has really affected the college's income. The college, number two, the college struggles to pay staff salaries and other administrative operating activities, to the effect that the teaching staff and all supporting staff have not been paid since June 2020. The college struggles to take care of some mysterious students who are staying on campus with their families who cannot go home due to the COVID migration laws. Students, on the other hand, have been affected by the abrupt closure of school. Some are struggling to find a proper place to live because their homes are far from the southern part of Malawi, while those who were about to finish their studies are worried of an extended time which will be expensive on their part. The college cannot facilitate online theological education or e-learning program due to inadequate financial resources to maintain internet facility, costs, and advanced information communication technology equipment. It needs to be mentioned that ZTC has never used online theological education in reaching out to students. However, due to the coming of COVID-19, Zomba Theological College is planning to introduce e-learning. Currently, we are working on the modalities of making sure that the program is in place. Currently, we don't have reliable internet connection, but we have electricity support available. In 2019, the college installed the solar panel system as backup. In terms of information communication technology equipment situation, I need to mention that we do not have enough computers for our students. Our computer lab has only 10 computers running to cater for 18 full-time students and 87 distance learning students. Zomba Theological College will need both financial and technical support of the college endeavors to introduce e-learning. The college believes that for e-learning to succeed, there is a need to improve its information technology situation, which include reliable internet connection and enough computers for both learners and the teaching staff. Not many of our students have access to information technology equipment, such as laptops and smartphones that can facilitate e-learning. Malawi government is considering to reopen schools. Currently, a special committee is looking at modalities to ensure safe environment for learners and teachers when schools reopen. Despite these developments, the situation will take time to heal for the effect of COVID-19. This entails that students will continue to struggle to meet their academic and living expenses. But on a positive note, it is worth to mention that the faculty members took part in the NetAct training on e-learning program. And currently the college instead is research seminars with a provision to participate online. The Board of Theological Studies has been working with the theological institutions on modalities to reopen schools. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Theu. It's really interesting to hear about the financial challenges and the difficulties of bringing e-learning and theological training online through Zomba Theological College. You'll perhaps notice in the chat function that there's been a couple of messages to you that address this from the Zambesi Mission and from the Ministry of Education position. So please do refer to those, and I hope we can come to some of that if there's time for discussion. I'd like now, if I may, in the interests of time, to move to our next speaker, Dr. Jonathan Groves, who is director of the Kerusso Trust, and the Kerusso Trust work on ministry training and Bible study across Malawi. And Jonathan will talk about the COVID-19 response from the Kerusso Trust, particularly working in rural areas, work that's done in combination with J-Life Ministries. Jonathan, can I come to you?
Yes, thank you very much, Eve, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I'm just going to screen share. I've got some pictures which I will run through at fairly high speed to accompany what I'm saying. Can everyone see a couple of logos now?
Yes, we're getting part of your screen and the logos. Thank you.
You should be getting a full screen on the logos now. Okay. Sorry, is that fine?
Yes, we have the full screen.
Good, thank you. Well, when I speak about we, here I'm meaning the Kerusso Trust, who is the UK partner, and J-Life Ministries, who is the Malawian partner. We're an enabling ministry, and so it's very much a case of the work being done in Malawi by the Malawian team, and we're raising support and prayer, finance, and in previous times we've had people come out from here as well to support and encourage. So we are a partnership that's working together. This talk really arose out of the main COVID-19 meetings, where it was highlighted how little seemed to be happening in the rural areas in terms of COVID awareness training and COVID response. And so I mentioned some of what we have been doing with J-Life Ministries. The talk will come in two parts. It's first of all, what life was like in the old norm, so you see where we have set the foundation. And then the second part will be the COVID response. And this is in particular how we're working with chiefs in the rural area around J-Life. So this is myself with Reverend Konexi Jalasi, and together we set up a church leader training program. We got together in 2011. Connex is the former General Secretary of the Zambesi Evangelical Church, so has connections all through Malawi. So we work with the J-Life team in Malawi, just outside Blantyre, and a centre that we've helped to construct. This is the team, and a number of those we support as Kerusso Trust, and some other partners and friends support some of the others. Our motto has always been training thousands to reach hundreds of thousands for Christ in Malawi, because if you train the pastors can reach their congregations, and if you train the pastors to train other pastors, you can really expand the impact for Christ across the country. So our main program in the past 8 years has been this program called Learn to Serve, which gives a basic toolkit of skills for the 90% plus of rural church leaders who have had no training. We've done this across the whole of southern and some parts of central Malawi. Over 2,000 church leaders trained so far. Oh, sorry, that's gone on. Go back. And that's been a program that I have very much participated in over the years. I've been to Malawi 26 times now, and in this particular picture shown training church leaders. We then have been multiplying the training of trainers by selecting some of those we've trained to train them to train other people. Training the next generation has now spawned off this. So where we've trained the church leaders, we're now looking to train the youth in those areas to be that next generation of trained leaders. And also reaching children. So in the area, particularly around the J-Life site, to the southwest or west of Blantyre, we've raised a number of community children's Bible clubs. But again, the feature in training here is that you're training the youth to reach the children. So it's a training focus all the way through. J-Life also has a holistic ministry in the rural community, and this is what's given the springboard for our successful work with the chiefs. Particularly getting out working with the child-headed families in Blantyre West Rural. In fact, I know for certain this house where this child-headed family are living, that was washed away in Storm Idai last year, sadly. Bringing joy into some of the child-headed families and getting them back into school and so on. They work with another organisation, Feed the Hungry, to provide food for the vulnerable groups around the community of Blantyre West Rural. Supporting community preschools, and helping in some of the deep rural areas with no primary schools to set up community primary school with food support. A number of community HIV support groups have been set up. There's now about 2,000 people have become open about their status around Blantyre West Rural, giving them support. Vocational sewing training for some of the ladies who are either abandoned or widows and have families to bring up. And of course, even a training ministry, when a crisis strikes, you have to step aside. And we had an emergency relief fund last year, which provided a lot of relief into that Blantyre West Rural mountainous area. Many of the houses ended up like this. And we were able to help provide blankets, plastic sheets, cutlery, and so on. So even though we're a training ministry, we respond when crisis comes. And the result of all this work in the community has been a successful amount of evangelism and discipleship, both directly by J-Life and in terms of training the churches in the area of their responsibilities towards the community. So as we move to the topic of village chiefs, the village chiefs, and here are three from one of the rural areas, many of them have come to faith in Christ as a result of Christ being shown to them practically in the needs of these deep rural areas. And many of the chiefs started saying, you've been providing training to our school teachers, you've provided some training through Learn to Serve to our pastors, you're training some of our youth, you're working with the people with HIV, you're providing food support to our child-headed families. What about us? We want you to show us how to be godly leaders in our communities. So just this year, we were about to launch a variant version of Learn to Serve, which has been designed for church leaders for the chiefs. More of that, it's taken a slightly different turn this year. Then there's the whole advocacy area, working with widows who are accused of witchcraft, and indeed working now with the chiefs to make new bylaws in their communities to protect girls after various stories of sexual exploitation going on in the communities. So it's opened the door to the chiefs being willing to have to hear from the way that they should behave to be godly leaders, and that's come because they have seen the practical way that our J-Life partners are working with them to help them in their deepest needs, and then they become receptive also to the gospel. This was an example recently where a new village development group was launched, and rather than calling in the witch doctors to commission it, they called in our J-Life partners and asked them to dedicate the group to Christ. So we're seeing the traditional divide between the church pastors and the chiefs being narrowed very much in this community, and the pastors and the chiefs becoming open to learning more godly ways. But then we came to this year, then there was COVID. All these programs have taken a rather different turn. We've been unable to carry out large-scale trainings of church leaders, and indeed many of the church leaders will be very reluctant to come to a gathering of anything like 100. We find in now that awareness in rural Malawi is growing that COVID is actually real. So what we did was we were able to engage with the chiefs in the Blantyre West rural area where they give an ear and have trust of the J-Life team. We were able to arrange COVID awareness for the chiefs with the view to the chiefs propagating that out to their people. The chiefs' wives or lady chiefs in some cases also attended this, did them in as much open space as was possible to arrange. We engaged the senior nurse from the local Chimembe Health Centre, and he went round giving COVID avoidance and awareness training. And finally, in the latter days, these trainings were conducted completely out of doors to reduce the likelihood of transmission when the chiefs gathered, and indeed trying to encourage social distancing, as has been highlighted earlier. It's not an easy thing, particularly in rural Malawi. It's very countercultural to encourage social distancing. We have distributed a large number of buckets to the chiefs. These are a number of them walking home with their buckets with taps and boxes of soap to set up hand washing stations. And we're hearing reports how the chiefs are keeping these buckets at their houses. They're coming out for all the village meetings. They're coming out at the funerals, and then the chiefs are keeping them safe as well. We've been given some support to the local health centre as well, because as was highlighted in the main COVID awareness meetings, very little, if anything, was going out to the rural clinics. And the message that I think we were all getting from there is local organisations, NGOs, anyone working out in these rural areas, do not wait for the government to send support. Get on with doing something yourselves to help in these areas. So we have run a fundraiser which has raised over £6,000, and most of that has now been spent, and that's included helping equip this health centre, which incidentally hasn't even had running water for the last year and a quarter since the pump was stolen. They have to collect buckets of water from 500 metres away at a borehole, which is very difficult when you're running a clinic. They often haven't had soap for 6 months or more at a time, even running out of bleach to wash their hands in. Sometimes it really is quite pitiful. So we're delighted to help them. And then in the second phase, we've been out to work with the church leaders. So all of the places where we have run that Learn to Serve training program in past years, we've been out round working through the pastors' fraternals across all the denominations. We've been out to each of those places and run COVID awareness for church leaders and distributed buckets and soap to the church leaders who participate in our training programs, so that they have those for their Sunday mornings to wash hands on the way in, and give them training on how properly to wash hands, you know, thumbs and fingers and so on for 20 seconds. Latterly, we found even the pastors were not wanting to gather for these meetings. So instead, we simply gathered the pastors' fraternals. These are the board of one of the fraternals, and simply delivered the cohort of buckets and taps and soap to them for them to take round to the churches, so that these washing facilities would be got round, and gave them the instruction on what to pass on. So we trust that that will happen. So really the question then is, what next in the COVID work? We've heard many of the constraints that the churches are facing. Well, we'll be revisiting the chiefs around the Blantyre West rural area, giving further advice and encouragement and distributing more buckets as and when we can. We're looking to get hand washing stations into the local schools. There's 68 of them in the Blantyre West rural and some of Blantyre South area that we count as our catchment. So we're looking at getting hand washing stations to help many of them that lack it. We're using the ladies in the tailoring group to start making a cohort of face masks. There's 2,000 members of the HIV support group, so it's going to be over 2,000 we'll make to get to them, plus some of the more vulnerable other people in the communities. And then people aren't coming to COVID awareness meetings any longer because of fear, so it's now going to be going around doing campaigns, perhaps using loudspeaker. And then finally, the question, how do we continue with leadership training when we can't meet? When we can't meet to train the pastors, when the children's Bible clubs have not been meeting at all this year, when the youth training has not been happening. Well, we're looking at using Transworld Radio or Blantyre Synod Radio to start broadcasting training for church leaders instead of holding face-to-face meetings. Maybe holding meetings in small groups with a view to that being propagated by each of them to other small groups. So looking at these other ways of doing training, maybe even using WhatsApp and Facebook for those who have smart enough phones to do that, but that still leaves so many in the deep rural areas no longer able to get our training. So that's the way we're looking for the next steps in what is clearly going to be a new COVID and then finally post-COVID era for this. So it's working out what it will look like, but what we're sure is it will not necessarily look like what it's looked like in the past. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Very interesting to hear about the training focus and how it's going out amongst pastors, the youth and the chiefs throughout the community, and very much trying to get into the rural community. I'm going to ask if it's possible for us to move on to our last couple of speakers so that they have a chance to present, particularly from the health, medical and care side. And I'd like to invite Dr. Arie Glas, who's medical director of the Mulanje Mission Hospital. I know you're not currently able to be in Malawi, but you're very close contact with the treatment that's going on. And Arie's talk will focus on the faith and care perspective in the treatment of COVID-19 in Malawi, and the challenges that Malawi is facing as the pandemic becomes more widespread. Dr. Arie.
Yeah, thank you, Eve, for this opportunity for the mic. I'm indeed in the Netherlands, as you said. For part of the period of the pandemic, I had to be here for personal reasons, and then we couldn't get back. But hopefully, from the 1st of September, Malawi will open its airport, or at least Lilongwe Airport. So it looks like more people will be able to go back and forth and from to Malawi and Europe again. I'm a doctor by training, and I'm also a manager of the hospital. And since this is a faith and work discussion, I thought I should highlight the spiritual team. And I have thought about what COVID-19 means for our staff in Mulanje. And I think really what stands out is the fact that there's a lot of anxiety at the moment. So anxiety is really central to the current situation in my organization. And that plays out on different levels. So I've taken 4 areas where we can see that people are indeed anxious, or were, perhaps especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and how that influenced our work. As a hospital, just as an introduction, we of course treat patients. So we have seen our share of COVID-19 patients, and people died of corona in our hospital. But like many Malawian hospitals, we also do a lot of prevention. So we've got a a large community program where we go out into the rural area that we serve and teach people about COVID-19, how to prevent it. The first, I think, area of anxiety for our patients and also our staff is, will I get COVID-19? Especially in the beginning of the pandemic, it was not so clear how infectious this was. And that also meant that our staff was really quite scared to treat patients who may have COVID-19. Especially if you think that in those early stages, maybe the right personal protective equipment wasn't always available. So that was a challenge to keep people motivated to be actually on duty and to stay put and say, yes, I will treat this patient. As a response to that, we as a hospital have immediately invested in a lot of gloves, face masks, soap, everything that is used across the world now to make sure that our staff can be safe. But that doesn't always do the trick because people know that in Malawi, there's not a lot of intensive care units available, for example, different from the situation in Europe. A second area of anxiety was where does this come from? The population we serve is undereducated, so not many people understand the concept of a virus. Not so much scientific thinking, even among some of our staff. So there were a lot of theories in those early weeks in March and April. Was this a curse? Is it a political interference? Is it a punishment from God or someone else? Are these foreigners bringing this virus to us? Not unlike we see in the United States, actually, where they call it the China virus. So this was another area for us as hospital management to address. And we very deliberately did teaching sessions for our staff, for all of them. So not just the nurses and doctors and clinical officers, but also cleaners, water attendants, the gardeners, so that everybody really understood what this virus was and how to prevent yourself from getting ill and preventing others. Then also in the communities, we did a large teaching program where we went to every single village that we serve and sat with their village health committee and their chief and explained in Chichewa how COVID-19 comes about and how it can be prevented. Then the third area of possible anxiety is what will happen when you've actually got it, because we had several staff members who were positive and also, of course, a lot of patients. And that was really a frightening experience because then suddenly you've got a disease that's in news all the time. Everybody's seen the footage from China, from North Italy, where people are wheeled into intensive care units. And also those serious cases. I mean, if you've really got severe COVID-19 and you get breathless, that's really a very frightening to go through. Yeah, and then people being lonely, being left alone because others are afraid of getting the virus from you. We've seen that here in Holland as well, people dying alone. So that's another area where I think there was a lot of anxiousness in the last months. And the fourth is what will happen now with us as a hospital. We are now in this middle of this global pandemic, and we still need to meet our budgets. They're not going to come to be less patients for other conditions like malaria or women giving birth. The number of cesarean sections will not drop. There's been so much attention for COVID-19 and its consequences that all of the other areas of work receive less attention. And some are actually neglected. Some programs are disrupted. Luckily, we're still doing vaccinations pretty well. But for example, the malaria program has been difficult to roll out this year. So we'll probably see more malaria. And the same goes for tuberculosis. In the international literature, the figures are staggering. If you look at the coverage of drugs for hypertension and diabetes in Africa, it seems that almost 90% of programs are disrupted. So people go without treatment for those conditions because of COVID-19. And it's also more difficult to find funds for your project or your cause, as most of us, I think, here will recognize. So a lot of uncertainty, and I've tried my best from when I was in Malawi and also here to bring back people's faith and trust and say, look, we don't need to worry. In this group, I think it's appropriate to read one verse from the Bible, Philippians 4, where it says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And that's what I've used a lot already in my work, this verse, that if we are accountable and we choose not to be afraid, but we do what we think is best at the moment, we will get through this situation as well. And like many have said already here, Malawi has had other challenges, the HIV epidemic, the political transition. We will get through this event as well. Concentration on prevention, on scientific thinking, make sure that people understand basic facts. And just keep walking with the people of Malawi. I think those three elements are essential. And definitely for us at Mulanje Mission Hospital. So that's all what I had, Eve. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for giving us that perspective from the hospital, and also hearing about the work that it's doing in amongst all the health challenges that are in Malawi, and going out into the rural areas with messages of prevention and understanding the spread of COVID-19. I'd like, if I may, just now to move to our last speaker, Cathy Radcliff, who's Chief Executive Officer and Director of International Programs of EMMS International, who will talk about that work that goes across 30 facilities in Malawi in healthcare and palliative care, and also perhaps to hear a little of the international perspective. Cathy.
Thank you very much, Eve. Thank you for inviting EMMS to talk at this event. And it's very nice for me to hear Arie just before me, because Mulanje Mission Hospital is a very close partner of EMMS in Malawi. So I'm going to share screen, and if you let me know whether you're seeing the full screen or if I need to change my view to full view.
Full view, please, Cathy.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the history of EMMS, particularly in Malawi, and also a bit about what we're doing in Malawi, but also the perspective that we do work also in other countries. So the beginning of EMMS goes back to 1841, when one summer evening in York Place, a group of doctors and ministers met in the home of Dr. John Abercrombie, and they met to hear guest speaker, Dr. Peter Parker, who was an American traveling around Britain to raise support for his missionary work in China. So this highlighted to these doctors in Edinburgh the importance of medical aid in missionary work. Oh, I don't seem to be able to move down. I'm going to have to come out of. I don't know what's happened here. I'm not able to. Right, okay. So this is the earliest example of medical mission in the Western Hemisphere. So it's quite remarkable that this organization is still going. And the objectives were to circulate information on medical aid to foreign countries, to help other institutions engaged in the same work, and also to help missionary stations to as many professional agents as the funds placed at its disposal shall admit of. So these are the original aims. One of the earliest members was Dr. David Livingstone. He was a member of EMMS, and he also did work for EMMS, for example, talking at an EMMS breakfast meeting, he spoke about his work in Africa, and this was said to be a notable occasion in our history, bringing before us a real medical missionary, a true man raised by providence for a great purpose. So he stayed connected to EMMS right up until his death. And from the 19th century, EMMS began from its earliest work to invest in global partnerships. So from its earliest days, it did that by sending medical missionaries to 49 different countries, sent over 400 to work in mission hospitals. And you can see from this map that they really were very widespread. When we look at Malawi in particular, of course, these missionaries went to the 3 CCAPs, Blantyre, Livingstonia, and Nkoma, and they included women as well as men, people who stayed for a short while, people who stayed for as long as 29 years. And today we still work in Malawi. We also work in India and Nepal and also Edinburgh. We have one small project in Edinburgh. Our Christian values are that we are faithful, empowering, encouraging, and accountable. And a critical thing to us is that every life matters. This is our big message. We had 7 projects before COVID-19. 3 of these are in Malawi, and they are mainly training healthcare staff and improving palliative care. Most of our work is funded by DFID, the UK government, and also by large private trusts and small private trusts and the general public. You can see the place that Malawi holds for us, because in 2019 to 20, we helped 90,000 people and almost all of them were in Malawi. 80,000 were in Malawi. And as a modern healthcare non-governmental organisation, NGO, we naturally work towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and we work on almost all of them. But particularly we work on goals 3 and 5, ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all people at all ages, and achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Our projects all contribute towards poverty reduction. So for example, we help women train for a career in healthcare, and we have proven through research that the palliative care that we do reduces poverty. So tackling the COVID-19 challenges, we have a new project in Malawi, which is with Mulanje Mission Hospital, where we have funded the buying and the making of PPE for Mulanje Mission Hospital, which they also share with Mulanje District Hospital. We've adapted our Malawian projects to COVID-19. So our big project is working with Mulanje Mission Hospital, Nkoma Mission Hospital, David Gordon Memorial Hospital, so one in each of the CCAPs. We also work with secular agencies, which are the Palliative Care Association of Malawi and the Palliative Care Support Trust. So our project is called Chifundo, Compassion, and this is helping 10,000 families, working with 4 central hospitals, so this is all over Malawi, and working with 26 other hospitals and health centres, so at least one in each of the districts. So we've adapted that so that each of the participating facilities gets more infection control, training in COVID, training of the community in COVID, help where people would like in the hospitals to do home working. More patients stay at home, so we've given them larger supplies of drugs so they don't need to come to the hospital so often, and remote care of patients. So that means that more people have been given airtime and mobile phones so that they can phone patients instead of having to travel to them. So these are the adjustments that the UK government has granted us in our project. But as we are international, our staff in Edinburgh are also occupied with, we have a new project in Nepal where we've given them oxygen cylinders, increased their home visits so that people don't have to come to hospital that's treating COVID patients, PPE for staff, and subsidised care for the poorest, which also helps the cash flow of the hospital. And then in India, we've done similar donations. So we fundraised for our partner there, the Duncan Hospital, and we've given them PPE, ventilators, visits to the community, which is not just for healthcare, but also to tackle the problems that arise during a crisis. So that's awareness of the fact that families are in crisis due to the economic downturn. They're more likely to traffic their children. They're more likely to commit domestic violence. So the community work is actually about those topics, as well as about how to prevent COVID. And again, we've subsidised care for the poorest because, again, that's a way of getting money flowing through the hospital to help its decreased income. The overall challenges for EMMS have therefore included that, unfortunately, our Indian partner staff have COVID-19. They've had a lot, actually more of their staff than patients have had COVID-19. So that's obviously a very worrying situation. People have had to isolate in their homes, but they're fortunately coming out of that. It's been largely the doctors who've had COVID-19. And then just generally, you can sort of tell from the foregoing that we have more work in EMMS, being a healthcare charity. So we adapted 7 projects, started 3 new projects. Our fundraising, of course, changes because you can't do so much face-to-face. And then we've obviously had to remotely manage our projects. So normally I make quarterly visits to Malawi. That all gets done remotely now. So thank you for listening.
Cathy, thank you very much indeed. And it's amazing the vast amount of work that's going on in healthcare and demonstrating God's care through all of this, and the history of the medical mission and how it has built and spread internationally and worked so extensively within Malawi. It's been really great that everyone has been able to stay through this call. I'm sorry that we have overrun, but I think the quality of the presentations have been well deserving of the time. And although I would like to have some time for discussion, I think I would like at this point to turn to David Hope Jones for a few comments, if I may.
Thank you very much, Eve. We're obviously running a little bit behind schedule, so rather than summarize, as I sometimes do in these Zoom meetings, the key points that have come out, I'll signpost to the video of this meeting that'll be uploaded in YouTube in the coming days. And if you click the comment section on the YouTube link, you'll see each of the speakers, and just by clicking them, you'll be able to go straight to that point on the video. And also my thanks to Craig, who's managing the tech behind the scenes. He will also do a short minute of the meeting. So for those not being able to attend, please do share those too. Craig, I wonder if you could put up the quick poll that we've got, the quick Zoom poll for everyone. There should be on your screen appearing 3 quick questions coming up. Firstly, would you like another faith-based Zoom meeting to continue this conversation? You're able to say yes or no, and if so, in what time periods, how you'd rate the meeting, and has this been positive for you? That's very useful feedback for us. Please, as I'm talking, please do complete that survey yourself. While you're doing it, before we look at the results of that quick poll, please let me thank everyone for taking part, all of our speakers. That's Reverend Professor Kenneth Ross of the Church of Scotland and the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, Reverend Dr Colby Kumwenda of the CCAP in Mzuzu, Rev Dr Gertrude from the CCAP's General Assembly, and our congratulations to the General Assembly on the election of the female moderator and the deputy moderator being female as well, to Brian Theu from Zomba Theological College, Jonathan Groves, the Kerusso Trust, Dr Arie Glas, Mulanje Mission Hospital, currently in the Netherlands, and Cathy Radcliff of EMMS International. Craig, I don't know how many people have been able to do that poll just yet. Are you able to show the results of that poll?
Hi, David. I'm still waiting on a few more people just before I close the poll, but I can close it in a minute or so if that sounds okay.
Yeah, no problem at all. Let me, in the interest of filling time while the last few people put in their questions and press submit at the bottom, let me do a few very quick plugs, if I may. Next week on Thursday, the 3rd of September, 1:30 p.m. Scottish time, 2:30 Malawian time is our next COVID Zoom. They attract 70 or 80 organisations working in this area across Scotland and Malawi. Please do join us if you can. From the 10th of September to the 22nd of October, we're running our autumn series of Chichewa courses. It's just £30 if you're a member of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, 6 45-minute sessions run by friends in the diaspora. On Wednesday, the 23rd of September, we have the Scottish Parliament's Malawi cross-party group, which all are welcome to join. That's 5 p.m. Scottish time, 6 p.m. Malawian time. Please do keep Saturday, the 3rd of October, the afternoon of Saturday, the 3rd of October, free. Put it in your diary. It's the Scotland Malawi Partnership's annual general meeting. Full details to follow, but some very exciting speakers, but please do keep that free. We also have an education forum meeting that we're just scheduling at the moment. It'll happen in October. I'm very pleased to see the Education Minister of Malawi, the new Education Minister, a great friend of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership. She's lived in Edinburgh, she's lived in Malawi. She'll be taking part in that, and we welcome any input to the agenda. Thank you, Craig. That seems to have worked well. Hopefully on everyone's screen, I can see it in front. There's been the results of the survey. It looks as if the most popular, very pleased, no one said that they wouldn't like another of these meetings. So thanks everyone for your message of support there. The winner in that first question was yes in 2 months. So Eve, if you are happy with that, my proposal is that we meet again in 2 months to review where we are. But I very much hope all of you are able to take part in some of those events and activities that I have flagged up. As always, very easy to find information about all of those events and activities. Just go to our website, click the news and events and upcoming events. So once again, my thanks to all of the speakers. Thanks to everyone for taking part, all the good questions, but thanks especially to Eve Hartswood for her drive and leadership and sharing of today's meeting. Eve, back to you.
Thank you very much, David. And I had hoped that there would be more time for discussion during this meeting, and I think there are a couple of ways that we can try and move that forward so that people can continue to communicate after the close of today's event. And one possibility is a WhatsApp group so that we can continue that discussion. I know WhatsApp, that might be a little bit more available in Malawi. The Scotland-Malawi Partnership also hosts a Slack group for discussion, so do try and join that. There's been lots of comments and questions coming through, and I would have wished to have time to address those, but let us please meet again. Let us take the opportunity to build on the excellent talks that we've heard today and to communicate and network with one another so that we can build on this opportunity. I'd like to finish by saying Ambuye Akudelitsani, my good Lord's blessings to everybody, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much for all the participants. It's been a really interesting and informative meeting.
Absolutely. There's a fine tradition of people turning their cameras on at the end of these meetings so we can see all of the faces there. It's kind of people to turn their cameras off to save the bandwidth, especially for our friends in Malawi. But let's do a quick check, see if anyone's still in their pajamas at this time in the afternoon. Not yet. Good stuff. Fantastic. Wonderful to see you all. Thanks again, Eve.
Thank you, David.